every once in a while, there's a story that comes along, a story that needs to be told. It's a story of God and how his story intersects with our story. Today, we're going to share one of those stories. As I begin, I want to first of all apologize. Some of you might think that the men are going to be here today, the 4 men from our church and community that had this experience this summer. But as I talked to them, they just couldn't emotionally go through telling the story 3 times to our congregation. And as I talked to them, I said, would you mind then if we sat down and videotaped your story, just to record it so we could share it with other people? And they said, that would be great. And so they did that about a few weeks ago, and what they produced is a marvelous, I think, retelling of God's story. Secondly, I don't want you to worry. I'm not going to preach at the end, okay? They're going to talk for about 30 minutes, okay? And some of you look at your watch and say, my goodness, this is going to go to next Viking season. No, it's not going to. Don't worry, okay? And so we will be done at the right time, about 10 o'clock, and just let you know that. But thirdly, as you watch, it'd be very easy just to watch and say, this is somebody else's story. Just to watch and say, oh my, this happened to them. It's going to be graphic. They're going to tell what happened on this event as they were attacked by bears. But as we tell that story, ask God just to reveal how it intersects with your story. You know, I've watched this video many times now, and every time I pick up something where God is telling me, you know, Dan, I want to remind you of this. This is about your life. So I'm going to just encourage you to think about that. Maybe after the service, you could just talk with somebody and just say, you know, what I heard today in this story is this is what God is telling me. So let's watch together when bears attack.
Hello, PCC. My name is Justin Reed. I'm here along with Tom Therian, Brad Johnson, and Todd Green. We have the extreme privilege of sharing an adventure that we had about 3 months ago. And in that adventure, we experienced God in a very real way. So we're just very excited to share this story with you and how we were impacted by God in this adventure. And also, we just want to thank you as a church for praying for us through this journey, even after the journey. We have such an incredible church family in you, and we are so thankful. So thank you.
Thank you.
A Minnesota man is recovering after he was attacked near the Montana-Wyoming border by what he believes were 2 grizzly bears.
It happened as a group of friends was backpacking on Sunday. They were hiking in the Shoshone National Forest when they encountered 2 bears.
So we've been friends since a lot of us have even had kids. We all met in a small group together at church. We just really got to know each other and started going on some adventures together. We'd go to people's cabins and hang out, or we'd go camping. And in 2009, we decided to go to the Beartooth Mountains. And it is a gorgeous, gorgeous area of the country. And so we went in 2015, had a wonderful trip. And we did come up upon a bear at the time. What's interesting about that bear sighting is as we crested this hill, we saw the bear, and the bear took off like crazy out of our way. So we just kind of always thought that bears ran from people. So we did carry our bear spray on the rest of that trip, but it never occurred to us that the bears would be as aggressive as we now know them to be. After the 2015 trip, we decided to go back and do this trip this year. As we leave and head west, we drive through the night and the sun sets. We use the time together to talk in the car and catch up what's been going on. So it's the first time that we get to connect as guys. Kind of fun on the way out there, as guys do. You banter back and forth and you pick on one another and have some fun. And when we were packing out, we noticed that Todd had this white tarp, and you'd think about the wilderness, and most people going on a wilderness trip would bring like a green tarp or a brown tarp to blend, or a camouflage tarp. There's tons of them at every store. And Todd chose to bring a white tarp, and that was pretty hilarious. We really picked on him for that. Another funny thing is that Todd, working for an IT company that does a lot of photography, he brought this huge camera case, and we have these huge backpacks on, and Todd brings this camera case, and he says, I'm bringing this really nice camera into the Beartooth Mountains. And this is Todd's first trip. We're like, yeah, no, you're not. You're not bringing that big camera. You're going to have 60 pounds on your back, and you're going to carry a camera case? I don't think so. We park at Clay Butte Pass, and we get out and we set our backpacks up and get everything on, and we take one final picture and say, okay, let's go. We close the truck and lock it and leave. And there we are for 5 days. We're heading into the mountains.
You know, right before, about a week before the trip, it was really quite ironic. I went to REI beforehand to get some of my gear because I'm a procrastinator, and it was during the work day, and I called Tom, and I'm there picking out my delicious freeze-dried foods and such, and I remember looking at the bear spray, and I didn't have any, and I'm like, and I just called, I was talking to Tom, and I said, there's this bear spray, and I probably should get some, and there's a 8-ouncer and a 12-ouncer. And I kind of said, wouldn't that really stink if you're getting mauled by a bear and you found out you should have got the 12-ouncer instead of the 8? Never thinking that we'd ever have to use it. And so, just the hike out there was amazing. And you're kind of almost like a school, just a little kid at Christmas time, just how beautiful it is. We finally got to the lake, and, I was just so excited to get to the campsite. And so we had our final break, where we just kind of rested for a moment or two, and Todd had his wonderful camera bag, and I'd been offering to carry it the whole time, but us men don't let each other help us. So he always refused, but this time I just grabbed it and, threw it on, and then I took off ahead of the other guys. And, I was just so excited to get there. I mean, I just, from my estimations, we were about a half hour from where we were going to, set up camp. And I got to this really steep incline, and at that point I'm like, I'm not going to stop. We're so close. I just got to suck it up. And as I reached the top, something caught my attention to my right, and I looked to my right, and I saw 2 grizzly bears, both the same size, at a full charge at about 30 feet from me. And I was just in shock, and I had the bear spray in my hand the whole hike, and I was trying to get the safety cap off the canister, and I was yelling and trying to make myself as large as I could, and in that 2 to 3 seconds that I had, I couldn't get that stupid cap off the spray, and within 2 to 3 seconds, the bears had really closed the gap, and they were about 10 feet from me at that point. And yeah, I knew at that time that I was in big trouble. And, I remember hearing as I was a kid, because we were always hiking in the mountains as a kid. And, you go to the ranger station when you're out at Yellowstone or whatever, they show you a video and they tell you if you're attacked by a grizzly, you're supposed to jump on your stomach and cover your head and play dead. And I always wondered, how in the hell do you play dead when you're being ripped apart? But I knew at that point I really had no choice. And so, out of frustration, I threw that bear spray can right at the bear's head, and it was only 5 or 6 feet from me, and I can still see the image of that spray can just flying right over its head, and I just kind of laughed. I'm like, I can't believe I missed it at that close. Not like it would have ever done anything to it, but and then I turned my back to the bears, and I jumped on my chest, smashing Todd's camera bag, and just kind of waited there, waiting for, what would be next. So the bears were on me immediately, and I can't tell if one or both of them mauled me. I was silent as they smelled and clawed at my massively overstuffed pack. And then a sharp, excruciating pain ripped into my right shoulder, and the bear's teeth tore through the muscles of my shoulder, and I remember I made the highest pitch screaming noise that I've ever heard myself make. And I remember the tearing of the muscles, but mostly I remember the unbearable pain as the bear's teeth found my shoulder blade and really got into it. I remember hearing the crunching and the grinding, but feeling it as well. And it broke my shoulder blade, and that was just so painful. About a minute into that mauling on that right side, the bear let go for a break. As it did so, I looked off to my right, still face down, and As I did so, there was this big gush of blood I saw flying through the air. And at that point, I was certain it ripped into an artery and avulsed an artery or tore an artery. And I thought I was really going to die out there. I was going to bleed out, and that was the end. As I lay there, the bears were kind of repositioning themselves. I was face down, and I remember initially I felt like they were sitting on me, but I think in retrospect, I think they were probably kind of standing on me with their front legs, kind of moving around me and pawing at my pack. And I don't remember the bear's claws on my head at all, but my pack was over the top of my head, but I had an aluminum canister on the top of my head, and there was a big claw mark through that canister. So if I hadn't been so poor in my packing, that would have been my head that it was squashing. So, and I was silent as they were doing that, just hoping that it would be over. Then the teeth sank into my left shoulder. The pain was much worse than that on the right. It was so sharp and so intense. As it was pulling and crushing, I was screaming again, that crazy high-pitched scream. The bear ripped the muscles of my shoulder and crushed a portion of my right scapula or shoulder blade. Its teeth then slid further down to my left arm and ripped off the majority of my tricep. As the teeth found purchase in my bone, the pain was far more worse than anything that it was on the right. The teeth and the bone gave that crunching and grinding feeling and sound, but there was also a sharp piercing and shooting pain that was unreal. Later, I realized that this was the nerves being torn and ripped and stretched. At this point, I screamed, "Kill me." I'm pretty ashamed of that. I'm ashamed that I would give up on Miranda, Haley, Ian, and Elise so easily. The bears let go sometime later after tearing out my triceps, breaking my elbow, tearing the muscles away from my arm and my shoulder, leaving a large hole in the back of my arm down to the bone. My ulnar nerve, which controls half the fourth finger and the entire fifth finger, was left totally exposed, but miraculously it was spared. As I lay there in the most intense, excruciating, and unrelenting pain, I wondered what was next. I was face down the entire time. I don't remember hearing the bears leave. I lay there certain that I only had a short time to live. I repeated portions of Psalms 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." My thoughts of Miranda and the kids flooded my brain, so much love and so much sadness that I'd be leaving them. So much hope that they would be okay, so much anxiety and yet peace about their future, so much pain that I would never be able to hold them again. I would miss the kids' wedding, the grandchildren, giving Haley and Elise away, growing old with Miranda. I had such a deep level of peace about my death and dying. I knew that God had me, and I would be with him in heaven that day. I had a vivid and peaceful memory of the lake and the dock at our cabin, the memories of the past summer fishing, relaxing, and enjoying God's creation were so crisp. As I lay there, the pain was excruciating and unrelenting and always present.
As we were crossing a dry creek bed, Tom stopped and he said, "Hey, did you guys hear that?" And Tom said, "It sounds like an eagle or a hawk screeching at somebody coming up upon them." And so we kept hiking, and then we heard it. Then I heard it the second time, and it was a really high-pitched, otherworldly sound that I couldn't really place. And come to find out, it was Brad screaming, but we didn't know it at that time. We thought it was an animal. All of us talked and said he must have come upon something feeding, either a vulture or a hawk or something. So we kept hiking, and it was the third time that we heard it. It was very distinct, and then we heard a human voice with it. And that's when something clicked in my mind that something's not right. So I took off running and almost passed Brad. I looked to my right, and the bears had thrown him behind a log. So as I passed him, I saw him down, and he was laying down on his right side, completely covered in blood. And it was just a surreal moment to where it was one of those moments of this isn't happening. I could tell immediately that he was in shock, and he had severe upper extremity injuries. And and I immediately started praying out loud. And Brad continually told us, as Tom and Todd arrived as well, that he has an arterial bleed. He believes he has an arterial bleed. It's over, and just leave me. He just kept over and over telling us to save ourselves, get out of here. It's over. And then he did ask Tom to get his phone out and make a video.
Get him out of here. So, Father God, take care of us.
Pull this back, Tom. Get that out of there. Break it.
I can't break
Don't
it.
let it snap it. There. All right. Hold on, Brad. We gotta get that out.
At that point, and for the next 2 hours, I was sure I was going to die. I asked Tom to record my last words to my family. Reluctantly, he agreed. As I paused, the only thing that I could say was, Miranda, Haley, Ian, Elise, Mom, and Dad, I love you so much, and I'll see you in heaven. Fortunately, I was able to switch to work mode. I work as a fire captain in Minneapolis, so I was able to switch my brain to non-emotional mode, and was immediately thinking, okay, we're 4 hours into the wilderness with no cell signal, so we need to get him out. And usually when we come in on these trips, we don't see anybody for the 5 days that we're in there. So the odds of us running into somebody were incredibly slim. So the initial thought was, let's build some kind of a stretcher or a sled. So I asked Tom and Todd to put something together. Fortunately, from what I could tell at that point, is he didn't have an arterial bleed. He had incredible blood loss, but as far as I could tell, there was no arterial bleed at that point.
When we came upon Brad, it was it was shocking, and there was chaos. We all just started working. I mean, everyone kind of did their part, and my job was to go get the trees to make the gurney. So I had to go out into the woods with my bear spray and saw, and I go down, I cut down a couple trees, and while I'm out in the woods, I could start hearing things moving out in the woods. So I yelled to the guys real quick, stop, 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 because we needed to be quiet so we could see if there was something coming up and attacking, because at that point, we really didn't know where the bears were. We knew that they had left, but we didn't know how far away they went. So whether they were out there watching us or what was going on. And you know, after the fact, talking to the game wardens, they said that there's a high probability they didn't go too far. So anyway, I cut down a couple pine trees, limbed them out, and brought them back. And Tom had come over with me and had his knife and some rope, and we built this gurney that we were going to try to carry Brad out.
I remember being put down on the gurney once. Being gently thrown down on my wounds was so painful. It didn't work the first time, so we tried it again. When it was clear that that wasn't going to work, Todd and Tom ran out to get help. It was just Justin and I.
We grabbed bare essentials. We grabbed one water bottle. Tom grabbed a whistle. We grabbed our cell phones. And that was about it. And we took off.
And mind you, we're 4 hours, 7 miles into a grueling hike. We're already starting to cramp up. So we're physically exhausted. And now they have the daunting task of thinking that their friend's going to die and try to make it out to get help.
And Tom was saying prayers out loud the entire time. You know, Lord, just help us get out of here. Send us somebody in the mountains that's a mountain runner or a trail runner, somebody that can get us out. And I remember I joked with him a little bit afterwards when he first started praying that. I'm like, gosh, you know, just ask for anybody. Why are you being so specific about a mountain runner? But it turns out that, you know, that's who was sent. So I was blowing the whistle, and I look up and I see two people, Dusty and Katie. And Katie had come running up and she said, do you guys need help? And we're like, yes, we do. And so Tom and I had tried to explain as best we could what had happened. It's truly a blessing that we ran into anybody, but particularly in this instance, Katie and Dusty had their two dogs. And as they were hiking, their dogs actually ran off the trail and went down towards the lake. So they had kind of been bushwhacking off trail because they went after their dogs, and by the time they got to their dogs, they were nowhere near the trail. So they decided it'd probably be easier just to skirt the lake. So if their dogs had not taken off, they would have never been anywhere near us when we needed them. We started walking with them, and we probably walked about, 300 or 400 yards. And Katie looked over to Tom and said, I can get out of here faster, which is exactly what Tom had been praying the entire time. He'd been saying, just find somebody that can get out of here faster. And so when she said that, Tom and I looked at her and said, well, go, don't wait for us, just go.
I wanted us to move down the mountain a little bit to a better, safer spot to where if we were able to get an aircraft we could signal from. So grabbed his waist and said, you got to walk for me. And he just soldiered. He just started walking. I couldn't believe it.
I'm not sure how he convinced me that I could walk, but he got me up. Fortunately, the bears had only slightly mauled my right butt and upper thigh. We walked down the mountain for about a quarter of a mile until I got so lightheaded that I was about to pass out. Justin found the most comfortable log that there was. And as he dropped me to the ground, I remember thinking, are you serious? I was hoping for a sleep number bed or something like that. Laying on my wounds was so miserable. It only made the pain so much worse, but there was no other way to lay. Looking up at the blue sky through the pine trees gave me some comfort. I remember thinking it would be so beautiful if I wasn't in so much pain. As I lay there, I was in constant prayer for mostly Haley, Ian, and Elise, praying for their future, their salvation, their spouses, their spiritual growth. Over and over, I would say these prayers. I would pray for Miranda as well, but not as much. I felt like God had her.
I had to go back to the attack site about 5 times to get sleeping bags and water and tents, anything to cover him up to keep him warm. So I would go back and forth and gather all that stuff, all the while with bear spray in my hands. And it wasn't until a couple weeks later that I realized the fear that I had going back. Number one, feeling bad to leaving Brad. And then number 2, going back to the site where the bears could be coming back for the packs. So I would grab sleeping bags. I was able to prop him up and get a sleeping bag under his back and then just stack layers on him. I think I had 5 layers of tents and sleeping bags on him to keep him warm. And then we had these Camelbacks. Our day packs had, so water container, Camelback is a straw that you can bite and suck water in, which was perfect for Brad so he could regulate how much water he was drinking. He was incredibly dehydrated from losing all the fluids that he had lost. So the camera case that Brad had picked up on that last break was incredibly destroyed by the bears, which it was clawed. Todd's phone was in there and has a claw mark on it. So it saved a lot of internal injuries, fortunately. And then the white tarp was huge in the signaling part of the story. The spot that we ended up in, we had a 180-degree view of the woods in front of us so we could see if anything was coming. And then behind us was a granite outcropping that overlooked the lake that I could signal from. So I took that white tarp up and laid it on top of that granite rock. And then there was a crevice on top of that granite top that I could set a fire up for signaling if we were fortunate enough to get a helicopter. And then I would just come back and I would lay with Brad and I would just pray with him. I would put my hand on his head and pray for him. And the first time I did it, he's like, hey, what are you doing? Kind of like I'm getting weird. I'm like, dude, I'm praying for you. Just relax, come on. So I would pray for him and his breathing was really sporadic for that first 2.5 hours. And then something miraculous happened at about the 2.5 hour mark where his breathing evened out. We both felt this peace and this calm, almost like, and I remember telling him, I'm like, Brad, I don't know why you just got attacked by bears. I can't tell you that, but I know that God is going to use this. He uses it all for good. And there was just this peace that we both had that it was that unexplainable peace that he's got this. No matter what happens, he has us. There's nothing we can do other than trust in him right now.
You know, what was amazing about the trip out is how Tom and I were able to really pull each other through. When one of us was struggling with strength or cramping or anything, the other one had their adrenaline going and was able to pull forward. And at one point, we finally heard what we thought was a helicopter. And, you know, it was kind of this sense of a little bit of relief, like, oh my gosh, Katie and Dusty made it, right? They really, really made it out. So, you know, there was that sense, but we knew that they still had to find Brad.
In my thinking, best case scenario is we'd see a helicopter by 5:30. Absolute best case scenario, far-fetched. At about 5:15, I went up and I started the fire. And then exactly at 5:30, I heard a helicopter, ran up, Sure enough, coming over to the other side of the lake was a helicopter. So I picked that white tarp up and just started waving it like crazy. And I had cut some green boughs to smoke the fire up for signaling. So I threw the green boughs onto the fire and smoked it up. They said that white tarp was amazing. We saw it the minute we came over the lake. So that's another one of those just huge blessings. And then they said, unfortunately, there's another rescue going on. So the helicopter we have is too small. So we're gonna have to leave you here, but we have room for Brad. So I remember, giving them a look like, oh, really? Yeah, that's great. Okay, fine. But there was so much relief that we even have a helicopter. This is just, in my mind, I was just incredibly overwhelmed with gratefulness that this is actually happening. He's gonna get out of here. We had to carry him down this steep mountain for a mile. And I'm very thankful for there was a male pilot and a male flight nurse that helped me carry him down. It was excruciatingly exhausting. We'd have to stop every 10 to 15 feet, put him down, and we would all just collapse and then wait for another couple minutes, do it again. So it took us an hour to get down there. And then we got him loaded up, and they assured me that they were sending a search party in, should be in about 3 hours, and then they took off. And but I had a peace. I had a real sense of peace. I had a peace that the Lord was with us, that He's taking care of Brad. I kept praying for Tom and Todd that they were able to make it out safely.
The helicopter ride took about maybe a half hour or so. At least that's what they told me. They could tell me anything at that point, and I'd believe them. If you're critically injured, they have what's called a stabilization room, and so it's a bigger room. And the chaplain was there, and he asked, if I wanted to make a phone call, and so I gave him the code to get into my phone, and I said, go under favorites, and so we got under the favorites, and then I said, okay, she's under hot stuff. And so, everyone burst out laughing, and so from then on, Miranda was known as Hot Stuff during our hospital stay. And
we made it out, I think, around 6:30, and so I think we sat in the parking lot till somewhere around 10:30 that night, and finally getting some more information, had heard that Brad was back at the hospital in Billings and that Justin was still in there. We were a little surprised to hear that, but that there was a rescue team on their way to help hike Justin out and rescue him.
So it was about 3 hours later, at about 10:30, that I heard my name, and I saw 5 headlamps coming my way, and it was the game warden from Wyoming and 4 search and rescue people. And I haven't felt that kind of emotion in a long time, just a sacrificial. To me, these 5 men risked their lives and hiked 6 miles through bear country in the pitch black to get me and bring me out. So I was overwhelmed with emotion, and so I shook their hands, and we had a 10-minute conversation, turned around, and we hiked out.
Tom and I got a ride to Billings to spend the day with Brad, and still one of the best feelings of my life is walking into that hospital room and seeing Brad laying there, knowing he's in pain, but just seeing him alive, and he was able to give us a smile. And so we spent the day with him, and then Brad's father gave Tom and I a ride back to our hotel because we knew Justin would be coming back down out of the mountain, and we were excited to see him as well. So Tom and I didn't really know what to do, so we kind of sat on the street curb outside of the hotel because we knew that we had told Justin where we were staying, but it was also 2:50 in the morning after an extremely chaotic time, so we weren't sure how much of that registered in his mind. And when we saw the car coming down the mountain road, we both stood up, and Justin pulled in the parking lot, and those hugs in that moment will live with me forever.
the hospital stay was wonderful. Part of that was I was on morphine a lot of the time, but they would get up and we'd walk the halls, and I remember walking at one point, and there was a patient there, and he was an amputee. He didn't have one of his arms, and I remember thinking about that very vividly. I think it was miraculous that my arms are still there, and at that point I didn't know if I'd have really any function left in them. But I think that is one of the miracles, that I do have a lot of near normal function in my right arm. And my left arm, I do still have some deficiencies there, but I'm able to do a lot of the things I never thought I would do.
What I take from this experience is still growing and changing every day. It's the belief in good people and great friends, and more than that, the belief and strength of God and what He can do for people when they need it and when they allow it. And but what God placed for us along this path and this journey is amazing, and I think it's still developing every day. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see where it takes us.
When the rubber meets the road, are you going to hang out with people that are going to lift you up, who are going to encourage you, or are they going to pull you down? And the biggest lesson for me here is to continue to hang around these men and men that just have your back. And we had Brad's back that day, and God had ours.
In hindsight, every single prayer, and I'm talking 12 to 15 prayers that I prayed up there, they all happened, and they were far-fetched. That we would get a helicopter by 5:30, that Brad would be able to get back to work, that you would bring healing, that you would use this in a mighty way. All these things just came to fruition and are continuing to come to fruition. So God was just incredibly present in this whole thing.
There's just so many takeaways from this whole experience, and I'm still processing them all. I think one of the takeaways for me is, we all have situations in life where we are kind of getting mauled by a bear. It may be losing a job, losing a spouse, losing a dream that you may have had ever since you were a kid. And I think for myself, I instinctively turned to God just because of my faith there. But without my friends, I wouldn't be here today. And I think it's just so critical to have a foundation in your relationship with God, so you have that to lean on when times are tough. And it's hard to imagine that you could say that blessings could come out of something like this. And I do feel like there have been so many blessings that have come from being mauled by a bear. Just the outflow of support that we've had from my patients, our friends, people I don't even know. I'm not sure what God has in store for the next few years for us, but even if this is the end of the story, it's been remarkable, and I don't think we'll ever know how many people it's touched, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
You mind just giving a hand of applause to my friends for their courage. To be open and honest and share that story takes a lot of courage. I don't know what your takeaway was. As I've listened to this several times, it's each time something different, but today it's just this: we shouldn't walk alone. The journey of life is such that we should never walk alone. I think Brad said it so well. It might not ever be an attack by a bear, but we're constantly being confronted by change and challenge in our life. A pain that you and I experience in different ways. The challenges of life, of making good decisions, so hard. And we shouldn't walk alone. And for Brad, he had friends, Todd and Tom and Justin, good friends. Do you see Justin's arms? I want him to be my friend. Do you see that? We want friends to walk with us, who got our back, who are willing to give their life for us. Do you have any friends like that? Some of us are walking alone today, and we need somebody to walk with us. And I just encourage you to think of who that might be. Maybe there's a friend that you've been building a relationship. Maybe you need to go further with that friend. And some of you have family members that you've broken a relationship with. You need to restore that relationship. You cannot walk alone. And I just want to offer, maybe you've been in church for many times. Maybe you've been to our church. I don't know, but we would love to be your friend. We have an Alpha program that begins on Tuesday night this week. And if you don't know where to start, if you just say, I don't have anybody, I'm all alone, I eat my supper alone, I go to work alone, I need somebody to walk with me. Just come on Tuesday night. We'll feed you, and we'll become your friend. And it starts at 6:30. We'd love to have you join us. Just talk with the hub. They'll sign you up so we know we're coming. There's other ways, but just make sure you're not walking alone. And secondly, hear God's promise. You'll never walk alone if you let me walk with you. The God who said, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. He is there, and he is faithful, and he is more than enough. If you talk to Brad and his friends, they will tell you that God showed up in amazing ways. I hear the video, and I hear them praying in the background, and our life needs to be a constant conversation with the God who is with us. And some of you don't feel his presence right now. You feel like you're all alone. And I would love to have you just come up afterwards. We have a prayer team that'll join us up at the front. And if you just want to pray with somebody, just lift up your concerns, some of the things you're facing. We can do that together. You don't need to do that alone. God is here for you. Let's pray together. Father God, as I hear this story, I'm reminded again and again that what you said is we will face trouble in this world. And God, that trouble can be overwhelming at times. And God, I know there are people here today that feel like they're all alone, that feel like they're fighting this battle on their own, God, and they're tired, they're overwhelmed, and they want to give up. I just pray that they might hear this reminder from our friends, God, that even in the darkest time, you're with us. In the shadow of death, you are there. Might we call out to you, ask that you would walk with us again. Thank you so much, God. I just pray that we might be encouraged today. And God, I pray for Brad, and I just pray that you would heal his body completely. I know from the inside out, God, there needs to be a healing, and that will come from your hand. I'm so grateful for Tom and Todd and for Justin and for our friends, God, that walk with us. Thank you. And I thank you for you showing up. You are a great and a mighty God. Help us to walk with you every day. In Jesus' name, amen.